Yo, what's going on, YouTube? And welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy, Kevin Forte. And, yeah, it's time for our Game 4 recaps. We have a team advancing to the second round. Wink, wink. And we have a lot of other series since the last time we talked after Game 2. A lot of things have changed and shift in Games 3 and 4. And we're going to go over that today. So we're going to start off in the Eastern Conference. We've got the Boston Bruins, who are down 2-0 coming home. They have won both their games to knot this series up at 2 apiece, going back to Game 5 in Carolina. Ever since Jeremy Swayman has come in between the pipes for the Bruins, things have looked pretty good. A lot more optimism, and the 5-1, 5-2 victories we were seeing in Carolina for the Hurricanes in the first two games, Boston has kind of given them their own medicine in the exact same form in Games 3 and 4. The Bruins continue to get goal scoring here from Patrice Bergeron. Marchand's getting on the board, power play goal. Pasta, Marchand getting 2 goals in Game 4, and Jeremy Swayman, who is playing extraordinarily well. Jake DeBrusk got his first goal of the series. That's a little concerning considering how well he played down the stretch since the trade deadline. You could argue one of the better players in the National Hockey League. That's how good he was, considering he was scratched throughout November, December, January, and February. So the Boston Bruins going to Carolina. This is a big Game 5 because can Carolina retake the momentum back at home? Or could Boston win Game 5 and then ride that momentum into Game 6 and potentially take this in 6? So it's going to be interesting. This is a critical game, really, for the Carolina Hurricanes, because you do not want to go back to Boston down 3-2. I don't think that's going to be a recipe for success. So a good series there. The Tampa Bay Lightning and the Toronto Maple Leafs continue to just throw punches at each other, literally and figuratively. It's been a physical series overall. There's been a ton of goal scoring. We haven't had a close game yet this series. It's been Toronto just blasting Tampa in Game 1, Toronto returning the favor in Game 2, Toronto going back at them in Game 3, and then Tampa doing it again, kind of going for the next knockout punch in Game 4. It's just been back and forth, just punching each other, no defense, it seems like, and just a ton of goal scoring. We saw that again in Game 4, where Tampa took the game 7-3. And, really the most interesting thing here is, Jack Campbell's been very good. That's a huge storyline here for the Leafs, and has given them a chance in this series. Maybe not so much in Game 4. But John Tavares, he played only 12 minutes in Game 4. He's really struggled for the Leafs, and he's been getting opportunities in front of the net, and guys have been passing the puck to him. He just hasn't been able to finish. So John Tavares, the captain of the Maple Leafs, hey, that was his lifelong dream, right? He's down to 12 minutes in his most recent game, and the Leaf fans are not happy with him at all. So kind of interesting to see how the tide is shifted with that, and the series is knotted up going back to Toronto. So hopefully the Leafs can get that momentum back in Game 5. Going to the Central Division a little bit into the Midwest, we have the St. Louis Blues and the Minnesota Wild. It's been a very back and forth series. Again, kind of similar to the Carolina series, except it's not the team dominant at home. They've been splitting the home and homes here so far. So St. Louis won Game 1, Minnesota won Game 2 and Game 3, and then St. Louis came back to win Game 4. That was a huge win for the Wild, as now they go back to Minnesota, and they have a shot to try and take the lead going back home in Game 6, so they could get home ice advantage down to the end here. So that's a really good series. I expect this to go to Game 7. I mean, out of all the series so far, I think St. Louis and Minnesota has practically been the closest in terms of each game, so I really do like that. The Pacific Division matchup, the LA Kings, holy God, things were getting quite concerning for the Los Angeles Kings. They won Game 1, controversial at the end there, but they win the game. They lose Games 2 and 3 by a combined 12 goals they lost by. They lost by 12 goals. So they lost by 6 goals in each game. The first one was 8-2, and I think the first one was 6-0, and then 8-2. Like, they were getting demolished. And then Jonathan Quick becomes the all-time U.S. goalie leader in the playoffs to have the most shutouts in the postseason. That's 11 shutouts, which now he has sole possession of, above Mike Richter, which is incredible. So Jonathan Quick, I mean, you look at the prior 2 games and you'd say, maybe not that good. But in terms of that regard, pretty solid stuff there for Jonathan Quick. So maybe that's the momentum they need going back to Edmonton. They're knotted up. They're probably thanking their lucky stars it's not 3-1 going back to Edmonton. And they could maybe try and steal a game here. Jonathan Quick stands on his head again, maybe. And who knows? I mean, they could take this in 6, but I really like Edmonton. I think Edmonton is still the better team here. And that's kind of been the problem for the Kings. They just haven't been able to shut down that offense enough. This is the first shutout of this series, so maybe there's some optimism there for the Los Angeles Kings, but it's going to be an interesting Game 5, and expect Edmonton to come out really hungry, because they are not going to want to go to Game 6 in LA down 3-2 in this series, because that will likely be the Kings' shot at this series now. So, what do we talk about for this series? It has taken a total shift, and I think that in the beginning of the series we talked about, I'm obviously talking about the Penguins and the Rangers. So the Rangers lose Game 1, and everybody was very optimistic that the Rangers would win this series, including myself. I had them winning this series in 7 games. But the disparity between these two teams was the Pittsburgh Penguins, coming into the 2022 Stanley Cup playoffs, were the oldest team in terms of average age. The Penguins are the oldest in the league. Meanwhile, the Rangers coming into this series are the youngest team in the 2022 playoffs. So a little bit of a disparity there between the young and the old in the National Hockey League. And I hate to say it, we're kind of seeing just the Rangers' inability to take back momentum. And once they faced a little bit of playoff adversity, they really haven't been able to get back from that. So they lose that Game 1. It was a close game. They came back in Game 2, and they did a nice job. I mean, they, chanting Crosby sucks and this and that. They win 5-2. Great. Knotted up at 1. No big deal. And you go to Games 3 and 4 on the road. Mind you, this is Igor Shesterkin's first playoff series where he's playing on the road in a rabid, hostile environment. And he has not fared well. Throughout the first 4 games of this series, he has gotten pulled twice in the last 2 games. So maybe this is more on Shesterkin, because the Rangers came out of the gate early and scored a goal in Game 4. Alexis Lafreniere scored his first playoff goal in his NHL career. So congratulations there to Lafreniere. But then in the second period, I mean, they gave up 5 goals in the second period, and you cannot have a winning formula when you're doing that. And Pittsburgh ends up winning this game 7-2. There was an empty netter, but actually, no, there wasn't an empty netter, surprisingly. No, that was when Georgiev came in. So overall, just a rough game again for the Rangers, and you combine the fact that they've given up 14 goals in the past 2 games. Again, talk about a winning formula. Not right here for the Rangers. And, for all they talked about how they got bigger, they brought in Vetrano, who's a pretty big power forward. Kreider's a big guy. Reeves. They aren't doing much. And you have to think in Game 5, they have to come out guns a-blazing. And they have no choice now. I mean, they're down 3-1 in this series. Everything's kind of on the line here for the New York Rangers. Like, it is do or die the rest of the way. I honestly don't see them winning this series. I mean, it's not impossible. We've seen crazy things like this happen before, even 3-0 series. But to see this young Rangers team win 3 of 4 here down the stretch, that's asking for a lot. And as questionable as Louis Domingue has been, the Rangers just, unfortunately, Shesterkin struggled, and the top line of the Penguins has been incredible, but now they're getting the depth scoring, and Malkin scoring. Gensel and Crosby continue to score, and it's just kind of just a disaster. You're seeing Danton Heinen score, Evan Rodriguez just completely lighting it up, scoring. I think he had 3 points in game 2, or in game 3. In the first period, he had 3 points already. So, it's just one of those things. The Rangers are a young team. This is to be expected, but there was high aspirations for the Rangers this year. So if they get booted here in the first round in, this fashion, they lose games 5 or 6, it's going to be a tough road for the Rangers. And again, maybe that's saying the expectation's too high, but you know what? Rangers fans were very adamant that this team is going to go on a long playoff run. How much of this team has gone in the playoffs, right? Including Shesterkin, Lafreniere, Kakko, Keandre Miller, even Adam Fox, right? None of those guys have played in the playoffs yet. You're going to have to go through some growing pains. Look at the Leafs. They haven't been able to get through the first round. And they've had Morgan Riley, Austin Matthews, Nylander, Marner, all those guys now for a couple of seasons. And they're still struggling, right? So to expect this Eastern Conference run in the first year or winning the Cup, you're asking for way too much. And I think the Penguins are showing, listen, we're still here and still playing. And as rough as things have been for the Penguins, I think they have a pretty good matchup here against the Rangers. And they've kind of exposed that here in the past 2 games. All right, so with that aside, let's take a look at the next one. The Washington Capitals and the Florida Panthers. A very interesting series. Washington has really caught me by surprise. I have to give my props to the Capitals here. Now, my line is still that the Florida Panthers win this in 6, and they probably can still do that. I mean, they win in Florida game 5, and they win game 6 in Washington, and they've proven here in game 4 that they can win in Washington. They were down 2-1 late in the game, and I remember sitting there watching, and I'm saying to myself, the Panthers are going to score here. What do? Sam Reinhart scores the goal, ties the game at 2. And then obviously Carter Verhaeghe wins it in overtime. 3-2 win for the Panthers. And the series is knotted up at 2. And what looked like the Washington Capitals were going to go up 3-1 going back to Florida, no longer the case. The Florida Panthers are just that kind of team. It's been that kind of year for them where that magic, you can't really, you say magic because there's no way to really describe it. And that's kind of what we saw here. Kudos to Ilya Samsonov, who has actually played very well as this series, really since the beginning of this series. Shout out to him. And again, for the Panthers, they stay alive. Really interesting spot. So this is the first series that is officially wrapped up. The Colorado Avalanche sweep the Nashville Predators. I'll be doing a whole video on this, so I'm not going to go too far into it. It was really just dominant by Colorado. I mean, they showed their dominance. They really kind of took it to the Predators. The fans tried to get into it in Smashville. They threw the catfish on the ice before Game 4. It just wasn't enough. They were just totally outclassed, outskilled, outgunned. And unfortunately for the Nashville Predators, they're going to have a lot of questions to answer this summer. Philip Forsberg, a UFA, Roman Josi potentially winning the Norris Trophy. I think that argument's going to be there, as both Josi and Makar are finalists, and they both played each other. So I think that's pretty cool. And we'll kind of see what happens here. So that leads us to the final series of the Game 4 recaps, and we're taking a look in the Western Conference once again as we already did that one. The Dallas Stars and the Calgary Flames. Dallas started to take some momentum in Game 3. They won it 4-2. Jake Ottinger has looked incredible and almost outmatching Jacob Markstrom on most nights. But then Calgary wins Game 4. That was a huge win for the Calgary Flames. And that's the difference between, say, a Calgary and the Rangers. Because Calgary was they knew they had to win that Game 4. And they were going to do anything it took to get there. And unfortunately for the Rangers, that's where you see that disparity between those two teams that will go on a playoff run and a team that won't. And that's kind of what you saw here in Game 4. Kudos to Jake Ottinger, though. I mean, he made some incredible saves early in this game. He robbed Tyler Toffoli a for-sure goal, but unfortunately it just wasn't able to hold up. The Dallas Stars end up dropping game 4, and now it's kind of, a changing of the tide once again as, Dallas now has to go to Calgary. Calgary's hopefully going to win game 5, and then game 6 and 7, now you're kind of fighting for your lives. So this is a really critical game 5. Is this the pivot point for Dallas where they reassert their momentum, or is this where Calgary continues their momentum from game 4? And they find a way to grind out this series. And that's what I think we're going to see here. Really good series so far. Honestly, there's some decent series. But I have to say, Dallas and Washington really have been my favorite series so far. You could argue St. Louis. But I think those two series, Dallas and Washington, I think those two series going on have been incredible so far. And we'll see how it all we'll see how it all unfolds, but overall, pretty excited that we're going to see Colorado, who I think is going to be a good team this year. I have them going to the conference finals. I think that they're going to get some rest here. Might come out a little slow in the second round if one of these, I think they play St. Louis, Minnesota, the winner of that series. And if they go to 6 or 7 games, Colorado has already been off for almost a week at that point. And that's when you start to think, well, are they going to come out a little slow and a little sluggish because they haven't been skating? Or are they going to be energized and fueled up while their opponent has been just grinding it out for that whole week that the Avalanche were off? We do see often it is the team that has had the break that ends up getting the reverse done to them, right? When, we saw that even last year. Who was that? Somebody swept. I want to say it was the Oilers swept in the playoffs. And they got reverse swept, right? They swept the Jets, and then somebody swept them. I don't remember. Maybe it was the Jets. I don't know. You guys can let me know down below. But we saw a reverse sweep, and that's happened. Even I remember the Islanders in 2019, when, the first year under Barry Trotz. In 2019, the Islanders had beat Pittsburgh in 5 games. Completely dominant that series. They got swept in the second round by Carolina. So you have to remember that maybe getting that extra rest ends up being a bad thing, depending on how things kind of go. So we'll see what happens, of course, because within the next week, we're going to see more hockey here in the second round of the playoffs, which is just crazy. So let me know what you guys think of the first 4 games of the Stanley Cup playoffs here in the first round. What do you think? Let me know down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again next time.